So I'm going to go ahead and get started with our coffee clatch. Yeah, so good morning. Hopefully everybody's got a cup of coffee. I guess I've got a Diet Coke this morning, so at least that's my caffeine. You don't really need to know about me necessarily. Or some of you probably already know about me, but I thought I'd start adding a little bit of what's the current news and updates around CMMC and this whole landscape right now. And so I'm hearing that although we had an interim final rule, and you got to love that language, right? Interim final rule, that is going to turn into a final rule in about 30 to 40 days. So remember, that's the one that put out the 3 DFARs, the new updates. It said you had to post a score. And supposedly they have taken the comments and input and adjudicated those. And I'm not sure if it's going to make any changes to the final rule or not. Well, I guess we'll see. But anyway, that's coming out in 30 to 40 days. So if you thought CMMC might go away, doesn't look like it. Also, there's a lot of talk around needing more clarity on SCADA and ICS industrial control systems in the CMMC framework. There just really isn't good guidance on how to protect that. You know, for example, CUI is supposed to be encrypted. However, CUI sitting in a CNC machine can't be encrypted for the machine to work. So what does that mean to the standard? We've, consulted that you need to take some compensating controls to kind of deal with that issue, treat the machine like it's export controlled or ITAR 600 series, but there does need to be more clarity on that. Also, in a recent Assistant Attorney General Boynton speech, he pointed out that the Department of Justice plans to increase their False Claims Act enforcement for falsely stating that you're meeting cybersecurity DFARs. So in reality, 4 years ago, DFAR 7012 came out saying that you needed to follow the NIST standard 800-171, and that required a system security plan and a POAM. So over the last 4 years, there's the assumption that small businesses and medium-sized, the defense industrial base has been working on their POAMs. And we all know in reality that percentage is a lot less. And so if you are going to post a score, I guess the point being is make sure the score is correct, even if it's not great. The last thing I was going to give an update on, that there's 117 companies now that have been approved as certified third-party assessor organizations. However, there's kind of a bottleneck in this whole process in that the DCMA, which is the Defense Contract Management Agency that has been doing these audits, they just don't have enough people to get all these companies through this process. So that's going to be a bottleneck to people being able to start doing assessments when they're ready. We are one of those, CyberNINES is one of those 117 companies waiting to get audited by DCMA. And really what that means is that we have to also be certified to level 3 CMMC before we can go do an assessment at that level. So we're diligently working on this stuff just like you are. And we're not done yet either. So kind of again at a high level, I'm going to go through this quickly because this is a little bit of a repeat from other sessions. But today, contractors again have to meet 110 controls, can be compliant with a plan to get compliant. Okay, that's the poem. And you must post a score on the Spurs DoD site. So, but by October 2025, October 1, 2025, you have to then meet the CMMC requirement, which is 130 practices. So you notice the change from control to practice. That's the difference. It's just a word difference, means the same thing. And you have to have a third-party assessment to meet those 130 practices. So if you ever have had your an audit by ISO or like a registrar for ISO 9001 or AS 9100, it'll be the same idea. Third party coming out doing a week-long kind of audit to accredit you to the CMMC regulation. And we talked about the fact that lots of companies right now are just not that close. And again, what are we protecting? Why are we doing this? Well, in the end, they kind of all come back to the fact that our Joint Strike Fighter looks a lot like the Chinese Joint Strike Fighter. And the reason is that, the Chinese stole all the drawings and information from lots and lots of suppliers out there. So that's kind of what started this initially, this big push. But we're protecting FCI, federal contract information. We're protecting ITAR, which is, more controlled military items. And then also 600 series, which is the less stringent DoD items. So that's what we're protecting. So next, so what is this all going to cost? So I put this together and, in all, just as a disclaimer, this is a real rough guess at the costs, but this is what I feel it's starting to look like after doing lots of assessments and working with a number of different companies. But the DoD is estimating that it's going to cost around $30,000 to complete the additional 20 practices, assuming you have full compliance to the 110 NIST controls. And we know we're not all there yet, even us. So, but that's the estimate that they put out. They also estimate that an assessment, an audit, is going to take about 5 days and cost close to $20,000. So that's at the end of your process of trying your journey towards compliance to CMMC. You have to get this audit, and the estimate is $20,000. So the DoD also estimates close to $40,000 annually to stay compliant. So I've broken that down into my own estimates, and I'm saying, excuse me, that I'm saying it's at about a 5 employee. And when I say 5 employees, you could have, your company could be 70 to 100 to even 200 people, but I'm assuming that you really only need 5 people to have access to this data. And by limiting the number of people that have to have access, you can limit, obviously, the footprint of where CUI resides, reduce your audit risk, and importantly, reduce your cost. So the cost, and again, our company, CyberNINES, is promoting using a third-party enclave tool that sits in a Gov cloud. So for 5 people, we estimate the annual cost to be about $1,800 to do that. Then included in that is I see needing to have 3 different MSPs to help support a small business get through this process. One is your normal IT support services, help desk, network, things like that. Second is MSSP, which is your security services. And this is going to support your incident response, help support all the logs and reviewing the logs that you have. And these are all requirements of the standards, both NIST and CMMC. And then I see, in MCCP is a compliance organization like CyberNINES, that is helping you work through the POAM and get everything completed and understands what's required to meet the standard. So those are your three service providers. We call it an MCCP, the Managed Cybersecurity Compliance Provider. I only see that needing the MCCP for the time period where you're working on getting compliant. And then I also see some projects that are going to come out of this annually, to whether it's implementing multi-factor authentication, creating and architecting the enclave. There's just obviously a bunch of different things that need to happen. And I estimate that cost to be around $15,000 for different projects. So my estimate for an annual cost is somewhere near $44,000. Remember, you got to add on the $20,000 at the end to get certified. And then I estimate an ongoing cost of $20,000, which is the IT support services, the security services, and the enclave cost. So it's not a cheap, inexpensive undertaking, but I think, having at least a good estimate, a good idea what the costs are important for you as in your business to understand, what it costs to be to be a DoD supplier. Hopefully that helps. And just some thoughts then on how to keep the costs down. It's really important to know where your CUI is in your company. Is it in your ERP system? Is it on drawings? Is it in emails? Is it, at home on your home laptop? Whatever. You need to know where it is, because that's where you have to start protecting it. Use an enclave, we talked about. Limit number of people that need to access CUI. Keep CUI out of your ERP system. So I often kind of talk about using, a routing step of build to print instead of getting detailed technical data in those routing steps, because once you start doing that, all of a sudden you've pulled your ERP system into the CUI enclave. And now you have to give a lot more people access to the enclave. Don't redraw parts if not needed. Allow smaller subs to access your enclave to view drawings for especially special processes for the kind of organizations that we've been working with. Then, where won't my slide go? There we go. There's also the good old, print the drawing out and then manage the drawing physically. Now you can give a lot more people access to CUI without having it, giving them digital access. So it seems counterintuitive at times, but it definitely is a way to reduce cost and give more people access. A lot of people want to, use screens or things like that on the shop floor. That is possible also. Focus on the physical protection once you print it out. Use a GovCloud solution. Stay away from on-prem solutions. They're more expensive and you got to manage it all. And then we talked about some manual processes help reduce cost. I also highly recommend embedding the information system security manual within your quality system. Make it part of your normal processes of training and everything else to support your cybersecurity requirements from NIST. And like I talked about before, use MSPs. That's probably the easiest way to get to compliant solutions. Just knowing that you have to manage the MSPs, and hence that's why having a compliance provider to help support managing the MSPs so that they know what they need to do to keep you compliant to the requirements. So what does this look like? Again, when I say enclave, this is what I mean by enclave. You have a corporate network with your normal administrative functions, finance, HR, sales and marketing, hopefully your ERP system, email, and then you have a secure enclave, and where you're using, again, a GovCloud solution to do that, that's firewalled off. And keep in mind, even printers have hard drives. So, if you're printing out a drawing or CUI, that printer needs to meet the requirement too. As you can see, I've shown Office and Gmail over in the corporate network, but there's ways to use, obviously, when you're sending a CUI drawing, it needs to be sent encrypted and meet the encryption requirements. However, there are tools that you can, where kind of a plugin for Outlook that looks like you're using Office 365, but you're really not. You're really using the GovCloud, but it makes it kind of an ease of use type tool for people. The other thing I wanted to bring up is there are ways to allow your subcontractors to access your enclave. You might have a supplier that you really like and you want to use, but there is just no way that they're going to, spend the money to get compliant to this requirement. You can allow them access to your enclave to view drawings, or there's even ways you could allow them to print, but then you're creating an extension of an enclave at the supplier that you're going to have responsibility for. So I would limit it to just being able to access the drawing. And this might be important, for example, for special processes, coding, painting, things like that, where they need to see where to put a label or put something on the part, and then they can just pull the drawing up in your enclave, and that's how they could do it. So, and this is I've got Prevail as the tool here. That's one of the enclave tools you can use. But so in this case, I'm kind of walking you through, showing you how the process would work using a GovCloud. And so buyer has a laptop that's encrypted. He gets an email from a prime that says, hey, I want you to quote on this part. Go to this secure website and get the drawing. So you log in with your secure access to the FTP site or their portal, ExoStar, whatever it is. You pull that drawing down and you store it in your government cloud location. You now then quote, send the email back to the prime, and you start working on, the process. That you start beginning the work order, setting setting the part up, setting it up in your ERP system. Again, making sure that you don't, get any CUI as you're doing all this setup into the ERP system. Then we talked a second ago about, sending, and you can use this Outlook plugin to send a CUI drawing to a supplier if you need to. Again, if you do send it to a supplier, the drawing, you need to tell them what you're giving them, and you need to tell them that you need to protect it, and you need to flow down the correct DFARS to that subcontractor, and then go ahead and build the part. And at the end of the process, you can scan that traveler and you can store that again in the GovCloud. So that kind of gives you a high level kind of look at what a process could look like that would be compliant. And I think that's it. So I kind of tried to go kind of fast to make sure I got done in time for any questions. And I see there's a couple, and I'll go take a look at that. So yeah, the costs seem high. And are there any resources available? And Yeah, and so first of all, the ability to factor these costs into your quotes or your RFPs responses to primes, it's an allowable cost to the government. Okay, so if you're a prime, you can put the cost as as an allowable cost. However, that makes your bid higher. And if another person, it just ends up, it may not help you because you've got to be competitive with other organizations. So I'm a little suspect on the ability for people to be able to recover those costs in the cost of their goods sold. And then there is some CARES Act funding to do some of this work, the assessments, but not the remediation work. So talk to your MEP, and both in Wisconsin and Minnesota, they are doing some CARES Act funding for this. So, just do a search on, it's part of the NIST organization. And so you can do a search on NIST and you can look those up. But the organization in Wisconsin is WMEP, and the organization in Minnesota is Enterprise Minnesota. So I'm gonna stop there because I burned through those slides quickly because it's a short 30-minute coffee class thing in the morning. So any other questions that folks have?
Just a reminder, you can type your questions in the Q&A box enabled in your Zoom control panel, or just raise your hand and we will unmute you.
Doesn't look like it, Rosa. So why don't you go ahead and throw up a poll, and that's it. So thanks everybody for joining. As a reminder, we try and do these once a month. Next month, we are actually going to go longer and do a panel, but we're going to have one of the CMMC board members speak at that event. So look forward to having you join that too.
And the recording of this webinar will be emailed you tomorrow morning. And please follow us on our social media, and please check our website for more information coming about our next CMMC Coffee Clutch. And thank you again for attending this webinar, and have a good day.